I've got a weird sample in front of me with no rhythm, no BPM. What am I even making right now? Well, I definitely think I hit the nail on the experimental part of this video. Hey, how's it going? My name's Noah, aka JLang, and today I'm going to be showing you one of my favorite techniques to make experimental beats in Reason 13. Let's get into it. I've opened up Reason 13 and I've got basically a blank file in front of me. As you can see, I've got a sample already loaded up in here. This is just an example sample that I'm going to be using for this video. You can use any sample you want, any kind of sample you want. In this case, I've just gone with a very simple acoustic guitar sample. In general, for this technique, I prefer samples like this that are acoustic and pretty straightforward and basic, because by the end, it's gonna be so distorted and different from the original form that I think the simpler it is at the beginning, the cleaner the final product will be at the end. But that's also the fun part about all of this, where you can do your own experimenting and try something that I probably won't even try in this video. But to get things started, I'm going to right-click the sample, bounce it, and then bounce clips to new sample. And the sample is gonna appear here in the browser. I'm gonna hit F9 to close the browser real quick. And then I'm gonna open the rack, go over to instruments, find the grain sample manipulator, and then just drag that right into the rack. Now the grain sample manipulator is actually where most of the manipulation is gonna take place for this video. I love the grain sample manipulator. I think it's gotta be by far my favorite sampler in Reason, and even outside of Reason, it's just so fun to use and you can make so many cool sounds from it. I just love it. And it's a stock instrument with Reason, so if you have Reason, you already have the grain sample manipulator with it. Next step, right click again, and then I'm going to reset the device so it's a blank grain. Then I'm going to press F9 again. I'm on a Windows, so I have F9, and then it'll open up the browser where then I can drag my sample into the grain. I also want to take a second here to make a quick disclaimer. I'm by no means a pro level grain user, and I'm sure in my explanation of what I'm going to be doing in grain, there's some things that I'm just not going to touch on or that I might miss. But if you're interested in learning all of the bells and whistles of grain, and there are a lot, and they're so cool if you actually learn them all, Reason already has a great tutorial on this YouTube channel that explains all of it. So I'll link that down in the description and you can check that out after you watch this video. Now I've got the sample loaded into the grain, and if you press this little play button up in the top right of it, you can hear it. Straightforward as it is, nothing's been manipulated yet. I'm gonna pull up the keyboard here for a second so that you can hear how it sounds right now in just the basic mode that it loaded in as when I reset it. Right, that's how it sounds normally. And then if I press a note higher up in the scale, you can already hear hints of that granular synthesis sound. It sounds a little bit more robotic than the natural acoustic sound. And that's also why I like choosing acoustic samples, because you can hear the difference right away. I'm gonna keep it in the long grains mode, but there are different modes that you can try that all sound different. There's the tape mode, which is really cool. There's the spectral grains mode. And then just the grain oscillator. I'm gonna stick with the long grains mode, and first things first, I'm just gonna increase the pan spread here a little bit so it sounds wider in the mix. And then I'm gonna go up right above the long grains tab and then press this arrow, which is kind of the playback mode of the sample. And I'm gonna choose the envelope 1. And now if I press a key, already sounds way weirder. And because it's in envelope 1 mode, most of the changes I'm gonna be making are down here in this envelopes window. So it's already on the place where we're gonna start, which is motion. This is just how the sample plays back, the speed at which it plays, if it plays in forward or if it plays in reverse, all that fun stuff we can mess around with on this grid, and we can manipulate and add points on the grid to change how it'll sound. You can change the curve of some of the lines. And there are a bunch of presets too if you don't want to draw in the lines yourself and you just want to hear some of the presets and how they sound. For example, if we press this kind of sine shape preset, It's a little bit too fast to really hear what's going on. So if I go over to this knob over here to the right, will determine how long it takes the sample to play back. So it had been playing back at less than a second, but if I turn it to the left, now it's elongating the amount of time it takes for the sample to play, so it'll be much more slowed down so we can really hear what's happening. So clearly, as the grid goes up, it plays forward, and the curve means that it's increasing in speed too. And then when it goes back down the curve, it starts playing in reverse. And so with that in mind, then you can actually start adjusting the curve yourself. So let's say I wanted to play this pretty much in reverse. I could kind of just make a line that's sloping down to the right. And now we're starting to get some weird but really cool sounds, really cool ambient sounds. Now this is the sweet spot. Once you start getting into this territory, this is where I like to start going crazy. Honestly, I think I'm just gonna turn the speed all the way down so it's really slow and sounds even more granular. Just so like hauntingly beautiful in a way. And this is all just in adjusting the motion envelope here. Now the start point here determines where the sample will start playing. If it's higher up, it'll start later. If it's lower, it'll start at the beginning. And I kind of want to start it right at the end of the sample because it's playing in reverse and the end's basically the beginning. Yeah, I'm really liking how that's sounding so far. So let's move on to the next section. The filter, I'm just gonna keep the same for now. And then I'm gonna go over to envelope 3. And with envelope 3, I'm gonna go below this envelope window to all this fun stuff. This is one of those parts where the adjustments you can make can be as simple or as complicated as you wanna make it. And again, I recommend checking out that granular synthesis video because it will explain all of this in depth in a way that I will not be able to. In basic terms, if I look to see where it says envelope 3 and go over to right below where it says destination 1, I can click that and then I get all of these options that appear for me to choose from. And depending on what I choose, then when I go to adjust the envelope 3 grid, it will have an effect on whatever I choose here. For example, if I go to grain, rate spacing, that is what this knob up here is in the long grains panel. I can make the spacing shorter or much longer. So instead of editing the automation in the sequencer, I can basically do that same thing down here. Let's say for the envelope grid, I keep it as is and I don't change anything. And I adjust the amount knob here, just crank it up so we can hear how it'll sound. And then I press a key. You can kind of hear the effect it has on it, but when I can't really hear it too much, that's when I really start to adjust what's actually in the grid to see what changes I can make to make it sound how I want it to. And that's also where I like to mess around with the presets because sometimes just picking a basic preset gives me the best idea of where to start. And then if I turn down again this knob to the right in the envelopes panel, I'm gonna say that's good. And I'm gonna move on to envelope 4. Basically, gonna do the same thing. But this time, I think I want to adjust a little bit of the distortion. And I'm gonna go with the distortion tone. Now, I've actually gotta turn on the distortion to hear it then. And immediately you can hear that the distortion has been applied to the whole sample. I'm just gonna turn down this knob over here to the right because I don't really need the effect happening too quickly, and I'm probably gonna change the preset. I'm just gonna pick something random, honestly. Start turning some knobs, see how it sounds, see if I like it. I kind of like the slightly muffled distortion tone, and I think actually I want it to move faster. I want the effect to occur quicker. So I'm actually going to turn this knob over here to the right a little bit more. Yeah, perfectly happy with that. And I know this sounds weird, but just stick with me because the payoff will be totally worth it. I feel like that's kind of how you know a beat will be cool, if along the way you're like, what am I even making right now? The final effect I'm going to be working with within Grain is going to be the reverb. And I'm going to have the LFO1 be what is controlling the reverb. And it's going to be specifically the decay. Now the LFO adjustments are going to be in this panel to the right. And like the other panels, pretty straightforward. This knob here will affect the speed in which the effect is occurring. And honestly, that's the only knob I'm going to be touching there. Here's how it sounds with no adjustments being made. I want to try to use the reverb in a way that makes it feel dramatic, almost as if the sample itself is breathing. So I think to do that, I want to slow down the rate of the effect occurring, and let's turn this up to about 60. I like where the reverb is at, but I actually think I want to make a few more adjustments to the distortion again. I'm just going to turn the drive down a little bit, and then the overall distortion amount I'm going to turn down too. Keep the tone where it's at. Perfect. And there are so many other adjustments you can do. You can set the mod wheel to make some adjustments to a specific effect. You can add another LFO effect. You can keep tweaking and changing as much as you want. But I'm going to call that good for now. And now I actually have to record something. Recently, I found that actually if I play one note and then play another note over top of it that's the same note, but just an octave higher, and just offset them by a couple beats, it just adds a whole nother layer of magic, I think, to what will be the new sample. At this point in time, the BPM's gone out the window. I'm just going for sound right now, and then in the next steps, you'll see how we can get things back onto the grid and on time with the metronome. But for now, let's just record it in. Well, I definitely think I hit the nail on the experimental part of this video. I've got the notes recorded in as I like, for as long as I wanted. I think the whole sample plays through. So now I'm going to right click and just bounce it in place. And here we've now got a direct audio file of what I just recorded in. Which is perfect, what we need. Now we're gonna right click this and then do what we did with the original guitar sample and bounce it to a new sample. Now, unlike the first time where I dragged the sample into the Grain sample manipulator, this time I'm gonna use a different instrument from Reason, and that's the Mimic Creative Sampler. Now, if I go into the rack, right click here, reset the device so it's blank, no sample in there. Now I can just drag in the new sample, which is Grain 1 Bounced. I didn't decide to name it, but you can name it if you want. Drag that in. And now we're starting to cook. This part of the process is where I start to move away from that more electronic style of sound design and more towards hip hop. I've got a weird sample in front of me with no rhythm, no BPM, but can I chop it up though? Yeah, of course. And that's exactly what we're gonna do. When I loaded the sample into Mimic, it's automatically on the pitch mode, but I want the slice mode. So when I press it, right away I see a whole lot of slices, probably too many for me right now. If I go over to the sensitivity knob over here to the right and just turn that down, already all those slices are gone. So I've just kind of got to find the sweet spot. We just got to wait for the slices to appear. And then as they appear and disappear, kind of find where there's a decent number of them. This looks good. And then I can just start spreading them out throughout the sample so that I have a clear idea of where each point starts and ends. This seems like a good number to me. Now I'm gonna pull up the keyboard again. And if I look at this little piano roll over here, it tells me where the notes are gonna be. So in the C1 range, C1 octave. All right, that works. This is one of my favorite parts of the process because I love to chop samples, and what we've just come up with is so atypical of what you would normally chop up in this kind of hip hop style that it's a fun challenge to try and find some sort of rhythmic and melodic loop. So I'm gonna just be adjusting these sample points, and then I'm gonna come back once I have them all, and then we can figure out an actual loop. Okay, so I think I've got the chops sounding how I think they'll sound good when I actually try and put them into a loop, and here's what we got. I basically tried to set up the slices so that they appeared at the beginning of every time there was a new note, or if there was any sound that I think would sound cool when kind of chopped in a sampler. Now I've just got to find the loop, and then we can actually put this full beat together. All right, let me run you through what I figured out. I turned on this reverse button right here. If it's off, the samples play as they would. And if I press the button, they play in reverse. Just adds a little bit more to the ambience of everything. And also I think I found a cool chop that sounds better in reverse. Along with the reverse button, I also over here in the slices section, pressed the play through button. So instead of ending where the next slice begins, it just plays straight through to the next one. So here's kind of what I'm thinking. That's the loop I'm leaning towards right now, so I'm gonna record that in and then we'll move from there. I also realized that the chop that I'd come up with in my head played at a higher tempo than the original sample, so I upped the BPM to 100 from 90. Now I'm gonna Control A to select all and Control K to quantize, and let's hear how it sounds. Nice. I'm making a couple little adjustments here just so that the samples play into each other and it doesn't sound like it cuts off too early. Now, sometimes what I also like to do in Mimic is once I have the sample chopped, go down to the pitch section and then just start adjusting the pitch and see if anything really stands out at me at a different pitch, because the pitch of a sample I feel like can really convey a variety of different moods. For example, let's hear how it sounds pitched up with 3 semitones. Pretty cool. Let's do the same thing, but down 3 semitones. I think in general, I'm probably not gonna pitch it down because it sounds like it gets a little bit muddy down there. And I could EQ that out if I wanted it, but I think maybe just 2 semitones up. I'm happy with that chop and how it sounds, so I'm gonna right click, bounce in place again so I can get the audio file, because now I wanna actually make a beat based around this sample. And I think I wanna change the BPM again as well, which is why it's just easier to make those adjustments with an audio file. So I'm gonna change this to, let's say, 80 BPM. Yeah, I like how that sounds a lot. Immediately I'm thinking like kind of melancholy trap beat is what I kind of want to flip this into now. So I'm going to add some basic drums to this and we'll see what we can do. I've imported some basic trap drum sounds. I got a clap, a hi-hat, open hat, kick, and then 2 different 808s. There are 2 808s I like. Not sure which one I think will fit the beat yet, so I'm going to test out both of them. I'm going to Control L, press L to make a loop and then turn on the loop function so we can kind of just get that basic loop going before I do major arranging. And I'm just going to start with the clap. Nothing too crazy there. Now for the hi-hat and the 2 808s, I'm just going to bounce all of those to new samples and then put those into the NNXT advanced sampler. That's what I like to use for drum samples. Right click, reset the device, and then copy and paste it a couple times, and then pull up the browser again, and then just drag all those samples into the corresponding NNXTs. So now if I press this one, this should be the hi-hat. This one should be the first 808. And the second 808. Dope. And then the rest of these, the original samples, I can just mute for now. Just recording some basic hi-hats next. Works for me. Select them all, quantize them. Might even up the BPM a little bit. Now I'm gonna find an 808 pattern. Gonna quantize this again, and I'm also gonna pitch it up an octave just to make sure that there are no wrong notes. Yep, there was. And another one. There we go. So now that should be good. Let's get it back down. Make a few little adjustments. Let's add in the open hat. A few spots. Ooh. Add a couple more claps in there too. And finally, at least for these initial instruments we've got in here, let's just add in the kicks. I'm just gonna layer them initially right over where the 808s hit. I've got the basic loop here, so I'm gonna do a little bit of arranging and mixing, and then when I come back, I'm gonna play the full beat through. And I'm back. And it is arranged, as you can see, and I did do some mixing, added some effects. I'll run you quickly through what I added so that you guys know before I play through the full beat. This is the original loop right here. If you can hear it, just as like a little intro for the main breakdown, I added these lasers. Little laser sound effect that was greatly enhanced by the Ripley space delay, new in Reason 13, dope. A lot of cool presets in there, and I used the Honky Trembles preset. Just add a little bit of delay and also a little bit of digital distortion on the high end, which is cool. Added some basic reverb on the drums and the original sample. Also added a little bit of Ripley space delay to the sample as well. Ambient Vibe Injector was the preset I chose, which you can kind of hear on the tail end when I pause it like that. Just, you know, subtle, but I think it helps fill out the space in the beat. As you can see, I added a little, what would be a verse section if I was really trying to give this beat to an artist, for example. And what I did was I added some halftime and OTT to it. Not Reason presets or Reason stock plugins, but just kind of an example of, you know, if you were making a beat and follow this technique and you wanted to add another section to add some diversity to the beat to mix it up a little bit. From what I found, basically putting halftime onto whatever sample you come up with just works perfectly every time. Like if we listen to the transition. Yeah, just perfect there. Yeah, that's it. Let's listen through to the full beat. There we go, that's the beat. Let me know who you think would sound good rapping or singing over top of this. And if you haven't already, check out Reason 13. It's out now, it's awesome, I love it, and I'll see you guys in the next one.